welcome to the Made Fitz Show. I am your co-host, Dr. Lauren Fitz, along with the beautiful Melissa Maid. And today we are here with a new friend, Dr. Jade Teta. So before I do my introduction, I just kind of want to tell you how our paths crossed. So most of you know that I went to Las Vegas to do a business workshop with Alex and Layla Hermosi. And literally, this room is full of 50 entrepreneurs that are super successful. And I'm looking around the room and I see this guy. I'm like, I know him. He didn't know me, but I was like, I'm going to have to go talk to him. Now, mind you, Dr. Jade Teta was just sitting in the back, minding his own business. We didn't actually get to talk as much as I would have loved to at that 2-day workshop, but we did cross paths and talk and realize that we are very much like-minded. So Dr. Jade Teta is a naturopathic physician. He is a fitness guru. He's got literally his resume is quite long. So he's not just a doctor. So Dr. Jade Teta, thank you for being here. Can you tell the audience your little elevator spiel, if you will?
Yeah, I can. And thank you so much, Lauren, for having me. And Melissa, we're meeting for the first time. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. You know, the way to think about me is I'm a hybrid health and fitness professional. So I started as a personal trainer. I started at 15 years old, actually. So that's a funny story. That's the first time I got paid for personal training. I did that through undergrad where I got my degree in biochemistry. And then I hit sort of a roadblock, which Lauren will understand. I was on my way to East Carolina University Medical School to get my MD. And I don't know why, Melissa and Lauren, I did this, but I never looked at the curriculum. I just had never paid attention. I was like, I'm going into medicine, but I looked at the curriculum and this was basically the summer before going in. And I saw there's no nutrition training. There's no exercise training. There's no psychology training. And I had already been doing all of this. And that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I thought I was going to be doing in medicine. And nothing wrong with drugs and surgery. Like Lauren and I both know, we've talked. So we're both, I'm pro what works, so Lauren and I are both that way, but I wanted to do lifestyle medicine. So it kind of sent me for a tailspin. And I then found a little known school at the time called Bastyr University that trained this crazy type of professional called a naturopathic doctor, which at the time I was like, I don't know what that is. That is absolutely nuts. Everyone told me it was witchcraft medicine. Do not do this. You're ruining your whole career. And of course, what did I do? I was like, well, I'm going in this direction. I had no idea that it was going to become mainstream, that functional medicine was going to become the thing, and that everyone would be wanting to do this medicine. So now I find myself in a position where I am this personal training background, this sort of biochemistry background, this naturopathic medical background. And now to round that off, I'm getting my PhD in transpersonal psychology. And so when you think about me, I like to say it's mindset, muscle, and metabolism. I like to put all those things together. And I really love to do what works. So I am slightly biased towards natural medicine, but I am also someone who takes anything that works and that is safe and wants to use it to help people get better. So that gives you a little bit of an idea, I hope, about who I am and where I'm coming from.
Absolutely. I love that. And I honestly, no, I guess I don't regret because I'm happy where I'm at. But I think looking back, I probably would have been more suited for a naturopathic medical route because I didn't quite know what I was getting myself into going into traditional allopathic medical school. But here we are. And we're all three like-minded people that ultimately have the same goal, that we really just want to take our gifts and skills and life experience and use those to help empower the people that follow us, the people that come to us as clients, as patients, to empower them, to make them realize that life is abundant when you are healthy, and you do not have to rely on the system to get you healthy, because it won't. It will fail you, and no one's coming to save you. And having people like the three of us give all of our gifts and tools to the person that crosses our path really can change the trajectory of their life. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And you want to know what's funny, Lauren, is I'll just say this real quick. I oftentimes, now that I see where functional medicine has gone, isn't it interesting? The grass is always greener in a sense, right?
Always.
So I oftentimes think to myself, I probably should have stayed on the MD path and gone in the direction that you went, just because it gives you more opportunities in scripts and things like that. So it is interesting, but I do think, it's one of the things I'd be interested in what Melissa has to say on this and what you have to say on this. I do think we are at an interesting time in terms of people who work with individuals for change, because in a sense, we are all becoming hybrid based professionals, right? At least the people who really care. Like if you really care about change, what ends up happening is you go, okay, here's my initial tool set that I learned. I see the limitations. I need to learn something else. And then you learn that and you're like, okay, now I still see the limitations. I need to learn something else. And we end up with this blend, I have found, with practitioners who end up with a little bit of all aspects of this, the mindset, the fitness, the metabolism piece. And I do think those practitioners are the ones who are doing the best work because they're always hungry for what makes the biggest impact.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's funny.
Melissa, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I just in my stories yesterday put, or was the day before yesterday, I was on a webinar, talking about muscle and longevity. And I put in my stories that as soon as you stop being the student, you have no right being a teacher, because I don't think that if you ever think you know everything, or you're done learning, or you're very comfortable in what you perceive as the truth, then you got to stop being a teacher, because that's just not how it is.
I agree with you. It's like at docere, that's a sort of a idea that teacher and doctor are synonymous. And I think Lauren and I definitely subscribe to that. And I think those are the best healers and the best teachers. They're students first.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how the mindset shift for me personally, because I just remember like doing the math, because I started college at 17 and I was done at 21, and then med school by 25, and then residency by 29. I was like so looking forward to being done with all the school. And now I realize like I actually love school. I love the learning. Like I will always forever be a learner. But I do think that the mindset piece is something that all three of us can truly speak to. And when I heard your little like, hey, let me just tell you what I've been doing for the last 10 years. When I read that, I was like, oh, this is it. So can you tell the audience essentially what you told me in our DMs when you told me what you've been working on for the last 10 years? Because it's key.
Yeah, I think it's and thank you for that, because I think it's exciting, and I'd be really interested to get Melissa's take on this as well, since she and I have not talked yet. The hook statement for this, right? Like sort of the hook statement goes like this. It goes, what we've been taught and told is that habits and behaviors drive change. So the three of us know, and each of us have probably read 1,000 books on habit change, and these books are all over the place. And the idea was that as I was reading these books over the last 20 years and really digging into habits and behaviors, what I found is that this is crazy, because no matter what the science says, to get people focusing on habits and changing their behavior seems nearly impossible, regardless of what the latest book says, whether it's tiny habits, big habits, smart goals, whatever you think it is. I just could not find the sort of clinical background to show me this actually works. And so for a very long time, I've been digging down and saying, why can't people change? So if it's not habits and behaviors, then what is it? From my perspective, what I think it is the internal narratives, definitions, and stories that we tell, the beliefs, which really make up our identity as humans. So it's not habits and behaviors, it's identity and beliefs. And so that was a hypothesis of mine, that if somehow we could change people's identity and the stories that underlie those identities and the beliefs and definitions they hold about themselves and the world, then automatically habits and behaviors would begin to change. Because when you see yourself differently, you begin to behave differently. Instead of banging your head against the wall of habits and behaviors, what if we could go beneath that and essentially say, we need to change the stories and narratives, definitions, and beliefs you have? And then that brings you to the question of, well, where did these primary stories, definitions, and beliefs come from? Well, they primarily come from our development. So once you start getting into psychology, you start seeing that childhood development, adolescent development, young adult development, and this still continues to happen, by the way, in adulthood. I call these misguided, unconscious decisions. So notice the acronym there, MUD. These things keep us stuck in the mud. They're misguided, by the way, because when we're children, when we're teens, when we're young adults, and even as adults, when we go through trials, tribulations, struggles, sometimes, yes, even capital T traumas, we don't have the know-how, the wisdom, the tools, the maturity to deal with these things. So we make decisions and choices about who we are and what the world is like before we actually have the wisdom to understand that. So that's why they're misguided. They're unconscious because they follow us around like a shadow, and they determine our behavior, whether we're aware of it or not. Carl Jung has a great quote on this. He says, if you do not make the unconscious conscious, it will follow you around and you will call it fate. And I believe this is what's happening. And I also think they're decisions, because whether we're aware of it or not, these were choices we made, and they're stuck now. And so if we could unwind these identity, these beliefs, these stories, we can begin to change how it is we see ourselves, how it is we behave in the world. So that's the hypothesis that I entered into. And I'll stop right there because I'm super curious what you and Melissa think about this idea. And if you have challenges to it, what your thoughts are, especially because you both have a vast clinical practice like I do. And it's always nice for me to talk to other people who do this work to see if they have a sense of this being accurate or even have come to the same conclusion.
Well, first of all, Melissa, do you realize why I wanted you for sure to be on this interview? Because how many conversations have we had about this exact thing, right?
100%. And Jade, it's funny, yesterday and today, I'm meeting with clients that I run these groups, and it's got a clickbait of lose 20 pounds or work with me until you do guarantee. And so I do have many that have lost 20 plus pounds. And so I'm doing a follow-up Zoom with them. And almost all of the ones that I talked to yesterday, it's like, what clicked, what's been able to help you lose that weight. And then, then they set a goal on their own of maybe another 20 pounds. I don't know how much they want to lose. But one thing that was kind of synonymous across the board, which was kind of an aha moment for me, maybe not. And I want you to tell me whether or not this is kind of what you're talking about, was them realizing that a lot of them had this all or nothing mentality, that it had to be all or nothing. And they just learned to give themselves grace and learn to slip a little and still be okay with that, and start back up, as opposed to, well, I ate the cookie, I'm going to eat the whole sleeve kind of mentality. And so I just wonder if it is that, obviously what you talk about, these unconscious thoughts and stuff like that happen, that they're just, this realization finally occurred, like, that doesn't have to be my narrative. That doesn't have to be who I am. I don't have to be this all or nothing person. I can have this gray area, and it doesn't have to be black and white.
Yeah. This is exactly what I am talking about. And I had seen exactly what you were seeing. I'm sure Lauren had seen it for a while as well. And it made me go and look and say, why? Because, not everyone gets there, right? And good coaches will get people there, but not everyone does. So I started to ask the question, what is it that is actually changing in these people? Because it's obviously some kind of insight or mindset shift that then you go, well, they're behaving differently. And then I can see over and over again, the ones who are behaving differently seem to have had some type of insight or mindset shift around food. When I started delving into this, and I'm curious what you both see with this, I started to see that something else was going on. Like when we think about people's identity, we usually think about it in what I would call the 4 jobs. Every human has a job to do. In fact, they have 4 jobs. To me, they have to manage finances. Some people don't like that, right? But even if you got someone on the street, they got to procure food and find shelter, right? So we must do that job. We also have to attain and maintain our health and fitness. That's a job that each of us must do. We must manage personal relationships, other people around us, give and receive love. And I think the 4th job is we have to find meaning and make a difference, sort of purpose and meaning in our lives. And what I began to see is that 4th job, somehow they began to see themselves differently and see their health and fitness as being an outcropping of how they were doing their work in the world. So you would see one of these 4 jobs shift, and their perceptions around these 4 jobs shift, that then in my mind, created the shift in how they started to approach food, how they started to exercise, and how they started to take care of their body. So that got me wondering, what is going on here that all these areas are changing at once? And what I began to see, and it's still partly, to be honest with you, a hypothesis, right? Because I'm an evidence-based guy, so I still want to understand exactly if my ideas are correct. But that's when we started going back to Well, how's your relationship with your mom, your dad, your siblings, your coworkers? How are these things changing? And they begin to see themselves as differently. And to make it simple, and this is a word that might trigger people, but to make it simple, they seem to give up the victim mindset around
Mhm.
many areas in their lives. And I'll just briefly prime that real quick and then see where you both want to go with this. But in my mind, there are really sort of three orientations that you can have when stuff happens in your life. You can be the villain mindset, right? This is the hurt person who hurts people. You could be the victim mindset. This is sort of the hurt person or stressed out person who overly identifies with that hurt and stress forever. Or you can be sort of the victor or hero who becomes the hurt person or stressed person who uses it to help people or uses it to grow. And so one of the things that I began to see is that these individuals became the victor. They started to use the stress and the trials and tribulations and trauma to now help themselves, grow themselves, enrich others, and evolve the world in some way. They ceased being the villain. They ceased to be the victim. And I wanted to uncover why is that and why did that begin to happen? And I don't completely know yet, to be honest, but I'm curious. I'm curious how you all see it. And of course, the systems I'm developing are all around this, but I still don't have the answer exactly as to how it's happening. But I do think it has to do with these internal narratives, how they see themselves and how they start to see stress and trauma in their lives.
It's so interesting you say that, just because both she and I both have, I mean, you don't know this about her, but she was born with severe feet defects and was basically told, or her mom was told, that she would never walk, never have, and she's been teaching fitness classes like her whole adult life. So
I
she
love that.
could have easily been the victim mentality and had a completely different life, but she was the overcomer, the hero. And I myself as well, I had not quite as big of a story as hers, but but still, when I had, life throw me a few curveballs, I saw this is opportunity to, overcome this. And I guess the question is, how do you, because is that just ingrained in someone? And if it's not, can you teach that to someone so they can go from the victim mindset to the hero mindset?
Yeah, I love that question because that was the idea, right? I was thinking to myself, can we do that? How do we do that? Now, here's the thing. We know it happens all of the time because, like Melissa said, she sees it. I know you see it, Lauren, right? We know it
Oh.
happens all the time. We just don't necessarily know how it's happening. And one of the things, the first thing that you need to understand, I think, when with my mind as an evidence-based guy, I go, okay, well, the how, but what's behind that? Like, how do we know it's even there in the first place? So the first thing you have to do is go, why is it there? Or how is it there? Or how do we know it's there? And what I started to see is that, interestingly enough, people have repeated patterns, recurrent obstacles, and stuck emotions that come up in their lives again and again and again. And to me, these repeated patterns, stuck emotions, and recurrent obstacles were pointing to what is going on. And then I think there's a self-awareness that happens. I think this is why, the definition of being, right? It's thinking, feeling, choosing, and acting in alignment. So a lot of us in self-development get really into being. You got to think, feel, choose, and act a particular way. But before you can think, feel, choose, and act a particular way, you have to see yourself differently. Your perception has to change. So I think the first step is people become aware all of a sudden that these repeated patterns, recurrent obstacles, stuck emotions are theirs. So they start seeing, hey, I do a diet, I find a new diet, I get excited, I lose some weight, I regain it. That's a repeated pattern. I get into a different relationship with a different person, but then it seems like it's the same relationship again. I'm doing all the same things. They seem to be the same person in a different body. I win the lottery, I get a new job, I make more money. But guess what? I have the same amount in my bank account. So they start to become aware of this somehow. And I think that's the first step. And that awareness then allows us to be able to say, okay, now that I know it's me, that I am, the villain or the victim, and I'm seeing that and I no longer want to be that, that starts making people think, how do I unwind this? And I think that's the first step. But I'm curious what both of your thoughts are around this, because I think once people see that, they can't help but want to do this differently. And by the way, this is why I'm interested in Melissa's story, because I think when we're young, it also is how other people, we are influenced by other people all the time. So it's also how other people handle their villain moments and their victim moments, and whether they actually see us as our next level human selves, or whether they want to keep us in a box. And so I do think a lot of this gets wound up in child and teen development.
For sure. And so just want to throw this right back at you. I noticed that with the girls that I spoke with yesterday, the few that were still, that had gotten that 20 pounds off, but were sliding back, they were still wanting that external motivation from me, that extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic. And I'm curious because I know that Lauren and I consider us both very successful. We're both very intrinsic. I could give two shits on whether, I don't need anybody else to motivate me at all. It's 100% me. And it seems like the women that I talked to yesterday, they hadn't reached out to me. It's almost like they figured it out and were just internally motivated to keep going. And the ones that were struggling, or the ones that were falling backwards, I kept hearing from them, I sure would still, what was making me successful was the daily accountability and the not disappointing you, and the me sending you, what I ate in a day. So it was always about me. And so I kind of connected those two, that again, intrinsic versus extrinsic, if there's that connection to anything that you're saying about, and I don't know if I'm intrinsic because of what I went through as a child, if that's because Lauren will attest, I win the prize for the biggest introvert on the planet. If, that has anything to do with, the birth defects and the teasing and stuff like that, and that's what made me intrinsic, or if it's just a coincidence. But I'm curious your thoughts on how people are motivated, if that plays a role, in their identity.
It 1000% does. So, and just for the listener, here's what's really interesting. I oftentimes think of it like protocol versus process, right? So extrinsically motivated people, they're sort of protocol driven. They see it as an outcome. And so they go, if I do this, I will feel safe and secure. Or if I do this, I will be worthy and belong. These, by the way, are child development is all about safety and security needs. Adolescent development is all about a worthiness and belonging needs.
Right.
Something happens, though, to the intrinsically motivated person where they go, I'm not interested in the protocol anymore. I'm not interested in an end goal that I'm going to get something that I'll feel safe and secure, or acceptance and belonging when it's done. I'm interested in the process. They start to attach their identity to the fact that they are a person who does this, and they don't want to do this. Actually, funnily enough, right, Lauren was essentially saying that she is a hard worker, and that she had this thing where it's like, one day I'm going to be over school and I won't have to learn anymore. That's a protocol mindset. That's an extrinsically motivated mindset. But when she got there, she realized, actually, I'm in love with the process. And this protocol to process switch is part of what is going on there. So I agree with you 1000%. And that's how it's like, you arrive when arrival is no longer the goal. That's how you know that the process is now taken over. And something about you, Melissa, is really interesting. Like we don't know, but it would be fun to play and hear this from you so we can learn from you in this regard. Something happened along the way that turns you into a process-oriented person. And here's what I suspect it might look like, and I'd be interested if you agree or not agree. Something happens when people go through hardship where they take a step forward. They see progress. They confront their fear in some way. They don't die, right? They get up from failure. They see a little progress, and they get a little bit more competence. Then they gain confidence. So we've heard of this competence-confidence loop. And all of a sudden, they get addicted to this competence-confidence loop. And instead of being addicted to an outcome that helps them I'm going to be this thing when I get there, they go, wait a second, I am this thing now simply by the fact that I'm engaged in this process. So I wonder with Melissa, if there was something that happened along the way where you fell in love with this idea of, I'm seeing progress, or I'm going to prove to them, and it may have started, I'm going to prove to them wrong. It may have started in that way, but something along the way got you addicted to the idea that I can do hard things, that hard things grow me, that actually hard things are the very point. And then here's the thing that I would say is perhaps the most beautiful mindset shift of all. This idea that perhaps maybe, just maybe, the most difficult things that have happened in my life were the greatest gifts, and I can use them to be unique. Because let's face it, there's never been another human like Melissa on the face of the earth, nor will there ever be again. Same goes with Lauren, same goes with Jade, same goes with all of you listening. And that uniqueness comes from the unique struggle. And that unique struggle, when owned, now becomes an identity. And when that identity is associated with this unique process and struggle, the sky becomes the limit for an individual, in my way of seeing it.
Yeah.
All I know is that I've got chills.
Yeah. That was very powerful. And I'm trying to process all of that. And I'm thinking to myself, whether my mom did this intentionally or inadvertently, she's a genius. So who knows? But she had a master's degree in special education. And so she always worked with very physically and mentally disabled children. And whenever someone would say, I feel so sorry for them, she would look at them as stone-faced as she could, and she'd say, don't you feel sorry for them? They don't want your pity. They don't want you to feel sorry for them. And so I kind of internalized that. And whether she meant for that to be a message to me as well as a child, with severe birth defects, I did internalize that. And so it started the, like you said, I kind of enjoyed the process of making it so people didn't pity me or feel sorry for me because, I was successful or I was accomplished, and that I was just as good as anybody else and I could do just what anybody else did. And it just became very perpetual.
and perhaps, and interestingly enough, perhaps better in your own way, right? There's something about that turns into your gift. It's almost as if your kryptonite becomes your superpower, right? And that journey is a powerful journey for people. And by the way, Melissa, I love this because how cool is this? Like I love stories like this because how perfect that your mom was who she was. And then she had you. Like you can't make this stuff up. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. She was still is a wonderful person. And it's not until you get into adulthood and you have your own children that you realize how blessed you were to have the parent that you have. So for sure.
Now, here's the next step of this. I would love to see how you all relate to this as well. Now, the idea then, if the listener's getting excited about this, right? The idea is like, well, how do we do this? Like, how do we actually, hack into the brain and change these stories? And so this I call identity restructuring, right? So the idea is we need to change the identity. Now, here's the first thing the two of us know, and I'm sure the listener already is sort of wondering as well, is that people defend their identities. Like we live in a world right now, right, where people will adamantly defend their beliefs. As a matter of fact, if you tell them they're wrong, they will dig their feet in. So part of this is just to point out, by the way, there's nothing wrong with this. We're all human. I do it too, right? Like, so no judgment here. But the idea is that we usually are defending our old identity. We're not looking to change it at all. So the first thing, that's why perception change is so powerful. And in order to change perception, we do have tools that oftentimes are confusing because we hear things about meditation, for example, and we just think this is about decreasing stress. And it is. And the way it's typically practiced is as a stress reducing technique. However, there are certain types of meditation that can literally change the brain waves in ways that allow new ideas to seep in, new identities to seep in. So the first stage is a 3-step process. The first stage is a rewriting process that involves things like written exposure therapy. By the way, I love this because the acronym is WET. So it's kind of like jumping into the shower and rinsing off your old beliefs. It's used in PTSD, which is how I found this research. It's very powerful in rewiring and rewriting the stories around trauma. So that's step one. And it's usually journaling techniques, breath work techniques to bring to the surface these old ideas and old emotions. Step two is a rewiring of the nervous system to change the habitual holding pattern of feeling. And this could get into a woo-woo area because I think this works on the quantum metabolism realm, which we could talk about if you guys are interested in that, but it might be way off topic.
Bring it. Yeah.
And then the third aspect is retraining the brain. The brain needs to see you doing the thing. So I'm sure when Melissa was going through her process, the brain seeing her doing fitness reinforced that, oh, I'm a fitness person. And so first you have to rewrite the old stories, then you have to rewire the nervous system, then you have to retrain the brain. And by the way, if you're familiar with people like Joe Dispenza and people like this, that stuff he is doing, in my mind, part 2, really good at that. I think, however, that it also needs part 1 and part 3. Part 1 is kind of like, it makes me think of part 1 makes me think of A Christmas Carol. Scrooge, when he comes in and Cratchit, his old boss, comes in with all these chains on him and he's walking across the room and he can't barely move because he's got all these chains on him. That's how I see the old stories, the mud, the misguided unconscious decisions. You have to clear some of those chains before you can just drop into meditation and everything changes. So rewrite, rewire, retrain the brain. This 3-step process, I think, is my hypothesis on how we begin to see such profound shifts in people's identity. It can't happen by itself because we are so entrenched. We want to defend that identity. But I think this is how it's done. And I think people like you, Lauren, you, Melissa, and listeners who've been able to achieve this, they're following this 3-step process, whether they're conscious of it or not.
The rewiring is huge. In my opinion, I feel like so many people want, I'm sure, Jade, you get this, and for sure, Lauren, I get so many people that come to me and just want the protocol. They just want the steps to make the change, but they won't do the inner work. They won't do the journaling. They won't do the meditating, the self-reflecting. It's just give me something physical, something tangible, and that's going to change my whole life. It's as simple as them following, a fitness competitor or an influencer or something and seeing their diet and the way they exercise. And they're like, that's going to solve my problem. Absolutely not.
Yeah. You know why I think it is? Because, cultural mantras matter. They really do matter. We don't oftentimes think of them, but one cultural mantra that I think people use a lot, and it matters, and it's just completely wrong in my mind, is fake it till you make it. And the reason why is because faking means that you're doing what Melissa was just saying. It's like, I'll go to the gym. I'll do some things with my diet, but when you're watching me, I'm doing the thing. However, when you're not watching me, I'm right back to how I was before. And so, by the way, no judgment on that, right? Because our thinking evolves. The better way to think about it is be it until you see it, because being is thinking, feeling, choosing, and acting. Faking is just acting. Being is thinking, feeling, choosing, and acting. Those 4 things have to be in alignment. So being it, be it until you see it, is a better cultural mantra. And I'll give the listener an example so they can break this down. Think about an actor who goes for a part. The faking actor goes, well, I'm Jade Teta. I'm going to read for this part. And when the director says action, I'm going to play this part. And when the director says cut, I go right back to being Jade Teta. Now, a method actor doesn't do that. The method actor goes, I'm going to play this part. And all of a sudden, they cease to be Jade Teta and they are the part. And when the director says action, they're already the part. And when the director says cut, they're still being the part. So when they go home and no one's watching at all, they are playing this role. And that's the difference between fake it till you make it and be it till you see it, because the brain is watching you all the time. And the brain will call bullshit when it sees you saying one thing and doing another. However, when you actually say the thing and do it, most importantly, when no one is watching, this is where magic begins to happen.
I see this transformation in my weight loss patients because, I meet with them once a month, and I'm always asking about the non-negotiables. And a lot of them, the non-negotiables, in theory, they know they should be doing it. So they know that they should be lifting weights. They know they should be eating whole foods, protein based. They know that they should be getting a lot of steps every day, and all of those check-in things that are just habits that, healthy people like us I don't need to check in with anyone to make sure that I get my lifting in and my step count and eat my protein goal, right? But the process, literally, they get into at first, it's like, okay, I know that, I have to do this because I don't want to be fired by Dr. Fitz. And then about 5-6 months into it, then it's become just the part of the process, and they're part of their identity. And so now it's, yes, they do have a goal, but they go from, I just want to lose weight to, okay, I'm actually enjoying the person I'm turning into in this process. I see this. I've seen this for the last 2 years with my weight loss program.
I love this. And actually, Lauren, I'll tell you something that's really interesting that I know you, I think you know this, but I just want to point this out. So Lauren and I have been connecting on, and she's been educating me a lot on the GLP-1 agonist that she uses, right? And what's really interesting about those drugs, because I've been studying them for a while, way back. Me and Lauren talked about the idea that I was in some of the very early stomach bypass surgeries that where this whole mechanism was elucidated. But one of the things about GLP-1s, go back to the 3-step process: rewrite, rewire, retrain. Those GLP-1 agonists, we think that what they're doing is shutting down hunger. They're actually changing the hedonistic response in the brain and the homeostatic response in the brain. So they actually do something that rewires your relationship to food. So if you have an identity around food, food is, food for a lot of people is no different than sucking your thumb or rocking yourself to sleep as a child. It's a self-soothing behavior. So these highly palatable foods and eating behaviors become self-soothing. So GLP-1 agonists don't just shut down hunger. What they're doing also is breaking this chain, this hedonistic chain that then allows us, when we're doing this coaching work, to more forcefully get in there and say, you no longer have to have food and this food behavior as part of your identity. And the only reason I bring this up is because it doesn't mean that we're just doing meditation and breath work and all that kind of stuff. There are other very powerful tools that we can now use. And so my interest mainly in GLPs is not so much to shut down hunger. That is great because, that can be something that causes people to overeat, but also to untether the emotional relationship to food. Right. So all of a sudden,
Absolutely.
when you're on GLP and you have a piece of chocolate cake and you don't get that same dopamine hedonistic response, it can break this chain. Now imagine we're also doing this coaching in the background, rewiring some of these old stories. And all of a sudden you come out of, 3 months on Lauren's program. And what she's done is she hasn't just shut off your hunger. She's rewired your whole identity around food. And that's why it lasts. And of course, Lauren is always looking, this is where you and I connected, right? We're always looking for what is safe and effective, not just effective, because the pharmaceutical industry oftentimes will just go, let's just hit it with bulldozers, big guns, and that causes a lot of side effects. So you got someone like Lauren thinking through this and going, we can do this without the big guns. But I see it, just as an aside, I also see that conversation. It goes directly to this identity restructuring.
100%. 100%. And that's why I think that what you've been working on for the last 10 years is exactly what I have been looking for a lot of my patients, because it's the missing element, and Melissa too, with her clients. I mean, we have talked about this topic too many times to count. I mean, we both can think of, quite a few people just off the top of our head that literally need this kind of approach.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And isn't it cool that we now have this multifaceted, we're getting there, right? It's like, I think the three practitioners like us getting together and having these conversations, it's really neat because all of a sudden we're seeing we maybe don't have all the tools, but we have way more now than we've ever had. And it is a truly holistic and integrative approach. Holistic meaning, it is mind, emotion, right, and body. We're all doing that. Integrative in that it is taking tools from multiple modalities. It's taking tools from the traditional medical world. It's taking tools from the naturopathic world in terms of exercise and nutrition and things like that. It's even delving into, the esoteric world of woo, we might call it, that, this ancient sort of tradition of understanding, which by the way has a ton of evidence now, but it didn't used to, of meditation and breath work and altered states of consciousness. We could even throw in psychedelics here if we wanted to. All these things together are giving us a tool set for practitioners like the three of us that is unbelievable in terms of we've just never had this level of holism and integration in weight loss. And it gives me hope that so many people, when they start combining this type of coaching with some of the medications that we have, with the new understanding in nutrition and metabolism that we have, that we may be able to make a huge dent in something that has otherwise been just a problem for decades and decades and decades.
And getting worse.
and getting worse, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But I think this integration amongst the three of us is a perfect marriage that needs to happen, because you have the Western medicine side that are just prescribing these GLP-1s without any kind of oversight, any kind of guidance on changing the lifestyle of the non-negotiables, if you will. And people are ultimately long-term, they're going to be a lot worse because they're losing a ton of muscle. So when they get into those elderly years, they're going to be on the OR table because they've fallen and they've broken a hip because they've got no muscle and their bone density is terrible, right? So people like the three of us have to come together to tell people how to do it right.
Yeah,
and give them all of the tools.
Yeah, and we can break this down in my mind, right? If we go thinking, feeling, choosing, and acting, and what comes first is seeing, right? So you have to see different before you can do those things. The dietary stuff is all about the choices, right? And the drugs and stuff like that is all about the actions and the exercise and stuff, right? So it's like we have been working in the realm of choosing and acting. And so a lot of the traditional medical world is like, well, just give them this. That's the action piece. Now go back, and nothing's wrong with that. It's just not complete in my mind. We have to go back and change thinking and feeling and seeing differently. So those three areas of seeing, thinking, and feeling differently is where the three of us have been well aware of for some time. Now add that on to the choosing and acting. So what I would say is the rest of the health and fitness world, and those of you listening to this, you'll kind of vibe with this. You'll see this is what you've probably been doing. If there's these elements, right? These 5 elements, you've only ever been told about 2 of them. And there's 3 more, right? Now imagine we can do these 2 that you've been doing a little bit better and add on these other 3. And all of a sudden, things start to look very differently on what's possible for you. And more importantly, and I think this goes to sort of Melissa, your story and sort of your approach to life in general, this goes to the idea that this isn't just about weight loss. This is going to change everything about the way you show up in all 4 jobs. And so the promise here isn't just that you're going to look better, you're going to live better, and you're going to actually be better. And then you're going to become that inspiring person who is an example and an experience for the world that changes someone else. And in my mind, that's all every human wants to be. When it really comes down to it, all they want to do is matter and make a difference. And they haven't yet tied this to the idea that when they make this change internally in thinking, feeling, choosing, acting, and seeing differently, that they are now vibrating, to use more woo terms, they are now vibrating. They are a different tuning fork. They're vibrating at a different level, and they will all of a sudden begin to inspire people just by their experience and their example. And they will begin to change people around them, as well as change the people around them. Everything changes when you begin to do this work.
I think of the patient that I saw yesterday she's 4'11" and she's lost 40 pounds. So you can imagine 40 pounds on someone that's 4'11. Like, she looks like a completely different person. And she's done this with her daughter. Her daughter didn't need to lose weight, but like, she does her step counts and she lifts with her daughter and her son. And like, she told me yesterday, she goes, you don't know how many people I've gotten to start counting steps and get a walking pad. And like, I remember when I first met her, she was at rock bottom, and she is a completely different person. And she has now influenced other people and inspired them. So it's contagious. And the more like-minded people that come together, the more we bring everyone else up, and then they bring everyone else up, and we can change the world.
And actually, let me say something about this to see what you two think about this. That's really interesting. One of the beliefs, it's all about beliefs for me. So I'm always looking for beliefs. And one of the beliefs you'll often find in people who are wanting to lose weight that I think holds them back is an ego-based belief. And basically, they'll look at people who are super fit and look good, and they'll go, oh, they're so vain, or they're so into their bodies, or they're so whatever. And to me, I go, interesting belief. That is blocking something for you. And the 3 of us know this, right? Here's what's really interesting. We live in a 3D world. So as such, we have to walk from point A to point B to get things. Our physical appearance is a direct reflection of our internal sort of ways of being. I believe this, to my core. And so to me, when you have someone who goes from looking a particular way to another way, a healthier way that they internalize. And by the way, culture does define this, right? So it is somewhat defined by culture. But when culture defines a particular look as healthy, and that person can achieve that look, and then they can look in the mirror, the brain goes, I'm on board with this. It is inspiring to themselves and to others. And so that belief of, it's very similar to having a belief of, I hate money or rich people are bad. That's going to keep you from money. It just will. It's an undercurrent. It's the same thing here when you start looking at a beautiful male or female or a fit body as vain or somehow not humble, or, we've all seen it in ourselves when we make these transitions. And I love this idea of this 40 pound weight loss, because what it signals is the opportunity for a very deep, energetic shift in this person. So I would just challenge everyone who's listening to this, who has this belief, check in with yourself. Always this is the perception piece, right? It is not vain at all. What it is a moving forward of the way the brain perceives you. It is a way to reflect, I am a healthy, vibrant individual. And by the way, other people will relate to that inspiring look.
Amen. So I know that there's going to be quite a few listeners that are listening to this and be like, I'm on. I'm down. Just tell me what to do. So for the person that needs this podcast and needs help for the next step, where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah. Well, I think they're in the right place, right? Because they have the three of us, right? So in a sense, and there's plenty of people who you can learn from. All I would say is that find the pieces. The first step to me is to realize the pieces that are required here. It's thinking, feeling, choosing, acting, and most importantly, seeing differently. So from my perspective, if you have not yet, if you're just doing the choosing and acting, you're just doing the diet and the exercise, Melissa said this brilliantly, right? She's like, you have got to do the internal work. And most people, I would say, either don't know what that is, are unaware of it, or are unwilling to do it because it's foreign and it doesn't feel like doing something. So to me, you have to do that internal work. And there are many, many resources there. And in that, there's these 3 stages that I believe, again, I don't know for sure, but I've been doing this work for a while and been seeing amazing results on this. You have to rewrite, rewire, and retrain the brain. That means you have to be with a coach who is doing some of this work and some of the tools and techniques that do this best. So that's where I would be looking. And of course, we've got the 3 of us who are doing together, right? It's sort of a powerhouse here because we're all doing all the same things, just focusing on maybe a little slightly different areas. But I think that's where people need to go. One of the things to know, Lauren and I'm talking to Lauren about possibly doing something with her around the GLPs. And combining that with, my coaching methods. And so that's another place to be looking. But I think ultimately the first step is to change that awareness that these are the things you need. And then of course, if you need help with me, you can contact me. I mean, you two are amazing and wonderful. I've just met Melissa, but I spent right before we got on, I was scrolling through her. This is what's great about Instagram, right? I was scrolling through it. I was like, oh my gosh, she's so cool. Like all the stuff she's doing. I love social media that way. And so it's available there for you. So I hope this primes people and directs them in a way that they're like, oh, wow, I did not ever hear it quite described this way. And now I'm starting to understand the importance of this holistic integrative approach.
Absolutely. That's exactly why I introduced y'all on Instagram real fast this morning, because I had a feeling that you hadn't had a chance to see her profile. I know that I sent yours to her earlier this week, but I want to thank you so much for bringing a ton of useful, actionable items to the listener, because that's what we don't want to happen. We don't want our podcast to just be something that they listen to for entertainment and that's it, and you don't take action. We want to give you the tools so you can actually go and make steps to better yourself. So I think that this will probably be re-listened to, and you might even need to re-listen to it and take notes, because they're great. There are multiple great quotes from our last hour of talking, right? Melissa, do you have anything else that you wanted to ask him or talk about?
Yeah, Jade, you made a couple of t-shirt worthy quotes on this for sure. To be on a t-shirt.
Yes.
I do have one. It's very selfish, But when and I could be totally wrong, but when I was scrolling your social media, and I think Lauren has left the mothership a little bit, but I'm curious on your opinion of this. I think I saw somewhere where, because it's, speaking of identity, I am just a true believer in intermittent fasting. And I think I saw somewhere that you are a believer in intermittent fasting as well, if I saw that correctly, which
100%.
is being such a smart man that you are. If you could just share a little bit your beliefs on that.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting, right? Like when you look at metabolism in general, what I like to do as a frame is just essentially say the metabolism has evolved for hundreds of thousands of years to be a particular way. And one of the things about it needs time with fuel gathering and fuel assimilation and digestion and absorption, and time without. And so we humans, fasting was built in. We don't eat when we sleep, and we would sleep historically, somewhere between 8 and 14 hours in some of the long days of winter in certain places. And so in that regard, everyone in my mind, just to stay in alignment of what the metabolism is doing, should be equal time with and without food. And so it is incredibly beneficial. And so when I think of fasting, I don't actually think of it as, the way most people are thinking. I just go, you need equal time, at least with and without food. And if you've been spending years and years in a situation where you've been over consuming, you may even want to extend that a little bit. Now, here's the one downside to that. Many people are wired hedonistically in their brain. And so for many people, intermittent fasting can become intermittent fattening. And let me explain that just a minute, because what happens is this hedonistic response is not quelled. And we live in an environment where we can consume 4,000, 5,000 calories in a sitting. Just go to the Cheesecake Factory. You can do this, right? And so one of the things that happens to a sizable amount of people who just jump into the intermittent fasting world is they get into these binge cycles, and it is not healthy for them to do that. So yes, in one context, I would say everyone should be intermittent fasting because that's what our metabolism is built for. In the other context, the metabolism is made rigid and hedonistically triggered through years and years and years of highly palatable foods. So in a very sizable amount of people who just try to do intermittent fasting and jump right into it, it can backfire. So that's the only big asterisk that I put on there. And so yes, I love it. Yes, it's something I use. Yes, it's something that if we all just lived in a natural world out in the wilderness, it would fix a lot of our problems. But when you put it in the context of the natural world, not everyone has the ability to be able to do it.
Yeah, just like the GLP-1s. I mean, it's almost like you need coaching. It's like, just don't hear the word intermittent fasting. Just don't hear about these peptides and think that you can, possibly do it on your own, especially if you have, disordered eating is a better word. The GLP-1s and intermittent fasting or anything of that nature would be better served with someone who can educate you on it the right way.
100%.
Well, and
but I'm so glad
speaking,
you asked.
I have not left the mothership, just so you know. I'm on the same page. It's literally just what you said, Jade. I 100% agree. I think though that I've seen it gone wrong bad with a lot of people, with a lot of patients, and I've also seen it go extreme. So it goes from one disordered eating pattern to a different disordered eating pattern, right?
Yeah.
I interviewed a preventative cardiologist last week, and the way that he does intermittent fasting, he really only eats when it's sunny outside. So of course, during the summertime, it's going to be, his eating window is a lot longer versus the winter time. And that kind of goes with our, how we would have done it before electricity and before refrigeration and that kind of stuff, but it is natural. And like you said, if we were all just live in the woods, it would kind of take care of itself, because we would go with periods of fasting and feasting.
Yep. Yeah. And to me, the easiest way to do this for the listener, I just go 12 hours with food, 12 hours without. Most people aren't doing that. If they just did that, a lot of their circadian rhythms would figure itself out. And that is a very easy thing to do, by the way, right? It's like, it's 2 hours. Don't eat 2 hours before, bed, and don't eat 2 hours, until you wake up. And you're basically in that if we're talking about this 8-hour thing. So that's an easy way to do it. Although I do think, not everyone can do it, will do it. You can still be incredibly healthy and vital and fit, otherwise, but I would say it is one of the most powerful techniques we have, mainly, by the way, not for calorie reduction or anything else, simply because the way it primes our circadian rhythm, which resets and sets the whole hormonal system, which I know Lauren and I, and, you as well, Melissa, are very much into. So I think that's really what it is really about. It makes staying on a healthy, fit lifestyle easier. It just takes some time. And most people, that 2 to 3 week month period, many people cannot make it through that and end up making things worse. So yeah.
But can we all agree on this fact, is that the whole snacking is healthy is not really healthy? And I think that was when I first was introduced to intermittent fasting, 10 years ago now, that was the first time that concept had even crossed my mind, that actually we're not supposed to snack. Like this whole concept of, a healthy snack was really created by these big food companies that have a huge profit to gain from me believing that it's healthy to snack. Right?
Yeah. And not only that, it's like, we have to remember the discussions. We oftentimes, we humans tend to think binaries, right? So it's a little bit more, if we go back, we go, well, look, athletes, they have to fuel themselves to move. So the whole snacking thing, food industry was in on that, and also getting confused about what an athlete does when they're training versus what a regular person does. Like, obviously, if you're an athlete and you're working out like crazy, then snacking is incredibly beneficial, right? It's like, that's what they do. No athlete in his or her right mind eats less and exercises more. They eat more and they exercise more. And isn't it funny? We all want to look like athletes. So I would say snacking is something that should be reserved for the athletes among us and not for the average person. It is a modern day construct. It is not and even the 3-day, the 3 meals a day, 3 square meals a day is a modern day construct. So I think I love that you brought that up, because these ideas, again, these cultural sort of mantras that we just buy into, this is why perception is the number one thing for self-development. You have to see things differently. And once you do, you go, oh, that doesn't make as much sense as I once thought it did.
Jade, fast, because this is huge. It's very difficult. It is even for me to change my mind. So do you have, just really quick, any tricks or exercises or even resources for people that are just like, I'm pig-headed. I'm pretty stout in my beliefs. And I think that could be a problem for me. How do I learn to embrace being open-minded? Because it's tough.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we have many people think the algorithms and everything are engineered to keep us stuck in our bias, that you can also easily engineer them for the reverse. So I'll give you a couple things that I do. If you went on my Facebook page, you guys would think I was a right-wing conservative nut job. And if you went on my Instagram page, you would think I was a left-wing liberal nut job, right? Because I cultivate these belief systems so I can get different viewpoints. And so I think through these things this way. And then I will tell you one thing that is the most powerful: breath work and meditation practices. Anything that puts you from the beta state into alpha, theta, gamma brainwave states, open you up and make you more open-minded. They literally, and psychedelics do this too. You have people who do meditation and take psychedelics and things like that. Open-mindedness is a personality trait, and this personality trait will change and remain changed for good. And so breath work, meditation, psychedelics, you don't need any of that stuff, though, if you start going, I'm going to start talking to liberals if I'm a conservative. I'm going to start talking to conservatives if I'm a liberal. I'm going to start reading books on meat eating if I'm a vegetarian. I'm going to start reading books on vegetarianism if I'm a meat eater. I got into this. I don't know about you all, but I used to. Every book I read when I was in my 20s was my new Bible, right? Like, I'd read a nutrition book and I was like, this is the way. Then I'd read another nutrition book and this is the way. And then over time, luckily, I love to learn like you two. So I just started reading everything, and slowly but surely I was like, wait a second, like, this is not how this works. So now I don't read for something to become my Bible. I read for something to Bruce Lee, by the way, Bruce Lee, the philosopher, artist, a martial artist, actor. He has a wonderful quote that sticks in my mind, and it goes, discard what is useless, take in what is useful, and bring what is uniquely your own. So basically what he's saying is, when you consume information. Take what's useful, throw out what's not, and always bring what works for you. So when I look at health and fitness, I go, there's only one rule in health and fitness. All of health and fitness, only one rule, like one ring to rule them all. And that is do what works for you, right? That does take some journeying and a process. And you and I, that goes back to this protocol versus process thing that we discussed. That puts you on a journey. This is a journey, and you arrive when arrival is no longer the goal.
That's my favorite.
So true. Yeah, that's my favorite too. Well, Jade, let our audience know all the places that they can find you, please.
Yeah. Well, of course, Melissa and I just connected on Instagram. So find me there at Jade Teta. My websites are jadeteta.com, nextlevelhuman.com. And I have a podcast called the Next Level Human Podcast. And if you DM me, I do try to answer all of those. I mean, I know Lauren and Melissa understand this. Just realize sometimes it can take forever, and sometimes I do miss it, but I will try to get back to you. If you DM me, I will do my best to answer that personally.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show. I know that the listener will 100% value this interview, probably listen to it again. And I just want to honor you for all of the good that you've brought to this world, and honor you for the good that is coming in the future for you. So, and I have a feeling that we will be working together in multiple facets. I'm just going to put that out there.
Well,
Melissa, do you have anything that you want to say?
Oh yeah, real quick. I'll just say you did do good. Good job. Jade, I really appreciated this conversation and look forward to learning from you in the future.
Well, I'm madly in love with you both. So I appreciate you both so much. And thank you for your work and for having me on. And thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate everything you do. So.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. If this was helpful to you, make sure you like, share, and all of the things. And Melissa has a saying. What is your saying? Because I haven't come up with one yet.
Jade might like this one. Wake up feeling prepared and go to bed feeling proud.
I love that.
Thank you guys for listening. Till next episode, keep doing you the best way you can. Maybe that might be my saying. Bye.
Wow, we've reached the end. But before we leave you, we'd love to hear from you. After all, it's not every day that someone reaches out and asks for your opinion. And to us, your opinion does matter.
Now, the content in this episode is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.
Share this episode with anyone you think needs to hear this message. And please remember to do your part of the bargain by rating, reviewing, and subscribing wherever you listen to the Made Fitz show.
We are Melissa and Dr. Fitz, and until next time, thank you for your time, support, and action you take in your own health journey. You get one life. Let's live it abundantly together.